What is up, y'all? Welcome back. We are here to wrap up our Fruits of the Spirit. I almost said what it was. I would have spoiled things. I did want to say, so if you've been here a long time, like way before we ever started the YouTube channel, we've always done it in a like teaching style, and that's because for a while I did them without Lenan here.
By yourself.
Yeah, and so I got really used to talking more directly at the camera and to y'all.
I don't like doing that. It feels awkward.
Right. And so we are going to try it a little bit differently. And we're going to do a little bit more of just a conversation with between me and Lenan, just talking about God and what we think about the passage. And hopefully it goes well for you guys. But today, Lenan, what are we talking about?
Self-control.
Self-control. I think we're going to need to really dive into where we can find more about self-control, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember our passage that we're in? Galatians 5.
Galatians.
22 and 23. Technically self-control is in 23, but we're going to read it all. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. So, as I was processing self-control, I think me and you both were kind of under the same agreement of just the idea of how we both can struggle with the stress eating side of self-control. And so I wanted to kind of dive into that because I feel like self-control is very broad. Like, yeah. You can go a lot of different ways with self-control. Obviously, there's a lot of different things you need self-control for. But I really wanted to focus more on what we had talked about with
on how it plays in your life.
Right.
The biggest area you struggle with self-control.
Right. And then kind of tying into, the why do we struggle with those things? So to start out that, I'm going to let you kind of take away the idea of self-control, distress eating, and how the lack of self-control.
I was telling Josh that I love how it ends in self-control because to accomplish all the things that we talked about previous, you need self-control.
Mm-hmm.
Because we live in a fallen world. We are human.
Right.
We have all of these ungodly emotions and habits that are just because we're fallen and sinful. And so you need self-control to accomplish all the things that we talked about with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I think that I like that it's at the end because it kind of gives us kind of a way of you want to accomplish this, you want to do better at this, you want to figure out how to do this well, be self-controlled.
Right.
And again, it is a very broad statement. You can take it spiritually, how are you self-controlled in your thoughts and taking thoughts captive? Because that's very hard to do.
Right.
I mean, taking thoughts captive is self-control, to not let your emotions and your thoughts run wild. And
right.
So you have the emotion, the spiritual side of it, but then you have the physical. With us, we both struggle with overeating and stress eating and all that kind of thing. And so, and I think that's something that nobody talks about.
Right.
I haven't heard anyone
say how they're stressing.
Yeah,
stressing has been really self-control.
Yeah.
Maybe nobody else struggles with it but us.
That's not true. That's a lie. There you go. Take your thought captive right there.
I was more joking. Well, I think it's very interesting because it's always been something I struggled with. But I think when I was younger and I was playing a lot more sports and being a lot more active, it was a lot easier to not notice the stress eating that I was even doing. And it's kind of scary because I remember the moment that I knew it was starting to become a problem was junior year. I had realized that I was a little chunkier than my friends, and which is funny because I look back at junior me and I'm like, wow, if I could get to that weight, I feel like I would be malnourished. But it's weird because I remember I would be over at one of our friends' house, and I'd be looking at the mirror, and they had that full size mirror in the Browns' basement, and I would we'd all be walking around with our shirts off, and I remember I'd look at myself and be not like what I saw. And I think that's actually what started it, is I I would look at myself and I would hate what I saw, but then we would all just eat so much because we still really weighed like a pretty decent amount because we were all playing sports. And so it was weird because I felt like I could justify my eating, but then I'd look at myself and I'd be like, why do I look this way? Knowing the answer, but never accepting the answer. And then fast forward as I grew up, I'd continue to do a really terrible job of overeating, and then I'd get hurt, and then that would really kill my stress eating, and I'd gain so much weight. And it's funny, like even now, I'm not to the place where I want to be, but I still, like, when I get compliments, I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. And so I think I've almost made it an identity, and it's funny because not funny, haha, but ironic because when I do look back, it all did start that junior year when I was starting to notice that, and I think I've never actually got over that. Like, I think that's been a sin struggle in my life that actually probably turns more into pride as much as self-control because, like, my pride is what makes me upset that I look that way, and instead of fixing it, I have that lack of self-control because I want that food in the moment and I don't have the control to tell myself no. But then I think really as I started to think about why, like I get that I don't have self-control, but why don't I have self-control? It was, excuse me, it was the realization that I'm just a very anxious person, and it's all my anxiety that I was letting out in overeating. And so I thought about the verse 1 Peter 5:7, which says, having cast all your anxiety on him because he cares about you. So I thought of that verse. Then I think it's very interesting because if you read the verse before and the verse after, it goes like this: therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God so that he may exalt you at the proper time, having cast all your anxiety on him because he cares about you. Be of sober spirit, be on alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And I had this realization of, I feel like we love the idea of casting our anxieties on him, but I think we struggle with the idea of humbling ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I lack in self-control, is I look back and I still am that junior self that is proud and wants to have a nice body. And because I've never let that pride go aside, I've never actually fixed the self-control. And I think where I was doing better at it was when I was in a state where I had kind of humbled myself and said, like, this isn't good. And I started to make a change, and then you get back to where you can feel good about yourself again. And then all of a sudden that pride comes back, and then I realize that I do a worse job. Yeah. And so I just think it's very interesting because when it comes to self-control, I think my underlyings are 100% anxiety and pride. And I just love that verse because it's the idea of, you have to humble yourself, because if you don't, both anxiety and pride, the devil will use, and he will devour you with your pride and your anxiety. And I definitely see that in myself. So I don't know. What do you feel like?
Well, I think that verse, I love the last part of that verse is like your enemy. I have it memorized in NIV, not what are you?
NASB.
Yeah, I have it memorized in
I knew
NIV.
it was throwing you off.
It was. Is your enemy, the devil's prowling around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. I think that's where we have to take our thoughts captive, and that's where, like you said, the verse before, you have to humble yourself to do that, because you have to admit that what you're doing or what you're thinking is not right, and not of God. And so I think that spiritual side of self-control plays into your physical, is you have to take that thought captive before you can make a physical change, because I mean, it's...
So you've used taking your thought captive a lot with this, which I like, because it's not necessarily, again, something that I would instantly attribute to self-control. What does it look like for you to take, like, what are your thoughts that you're taking captive when it comes to self-control for you?
Well, I think your thoughts drive all your actions. Like, you're not just a mindless robot. God didn't create mindless robots. Because if he did, we'd all be worshiping God. Like, he gave us free will. He gave us our own thoughts. And so I think our thoughts direct everything that we do.
Right.
And so to take your thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ, which means you have to have a kingdom mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And with me, for overeating, like that's my thought, is like I know in the moment I should not eat this,
right.
And I have that thought I should not eat this,
but
I still do it anyways.
Interesting. I like that.
And it's like I override myself, and I know that it's wrong, that I should not eat 2 bags, like family-sized bags of chips, but I do it anyways. And then
I have never seen you eat 2 family-sized bag of chips.
I have. Yeah, I have. Not proud of it, but I have. And then I think that's where you're prowling around like a roaring lion. Is he devours you? Like he tempts you to do it, and then he devours you afterwards and tells you how terrible you are. And in any form of weakness, it doesn't have to be overeating, doesn't have to be food, but like in any form of overindulgence or lack of self-control, is he tempts you to do it, you do it, and then he makes you feel terrible about yourself. He devours you with it. Yeah. And so I think that's where it comes in, again, taking your thoughts captive. Right. Is your thought is what drives your actions. But if your thought is on God and on, the verse, I think it's right after, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe it's, or it's like, whatever's true, whatever's pure, whatever's noble, like,
it's James,
set your mind on these things.
Is that James?
I'm really sad that I don't remember this address because I love that set of verses, but I cannot remember.
I have another one that you made me.
And so I just, I want to say it's one of the Ephesians or Philippians or something.
Yeah, it sounds Ephesians kind of stuff.
And so, anyways, I just think that those 2 verses play really well into self-control and how hard it is to have self-control when our minds are so focused on our own self and our own wants, when we don't have a kingdom or a God mindset, when we're not filling our mind with scripture or worship music or those things that lift you up and build you up and give you those right thoughts.
Well, I think of Psalm 119:11. I have treasured your word in my heart so that I may not sin against you. I was like, I think that it's kind of the epitome of the whole take your thought captive, or like aligning your mind to always be on God. And it is true. So I think of it this way. When it comes to self-control, you have to be prepared. Like, you don't take thoughts captive at will. Like, it's not something that just happens. Like, you have to
practice it.
Right. And so I think for me, the big thing is my lack of preparation. I think that's probably where God's been showing me that I need to do a better job when it comes to self-control, is that having something prepared, having verses on hand. Yeah. First big crucial thing. But my other thing is just, I feel like, you let yourself get, whether it's work or the, graduations are coming up or something. And so I'm not spending excess time. Like, I have my morning Bible time and then my sermons and worship music in the car and everything. And that's cool. But I haven't had time to sit down and dig into a passage truly. And I think I've given myself that time, and I haven't chosen to prioritize that. And I think that's where my self-control lacks. Because I think when you're indulging in the word, not just hearing it, because I think sometimes, I think hearing is great. I think worship music and sermons, right, but then that's all well and good, but that is easily forgotten. Whereas when you actually indulge in it, I feel like that's when you solidify it enough to actually use it when something actually comes up. And when that bag of chips comes out, you're like, no, get behind me, Satan. Yeah. And I think Jesus did a great job of that. I think we saw a ton of self-control, obviously, from Jesus. I love the song, which would definitely be our song of the week. Abandon, which I know we've already done, but Brandon Lake's verse when he's like, what kind of self-control is this?
So you had angels at your fingertips.
And at the cross you remained. I was like, oh my goodness. And it's just so true. And I love the fact that Jesus really did
show self-control.
Everything. Well, he showed everything. It's like every fruit of the Spirit you can walk back and see in Jesus' life. And then, like you said, you need self-control to do any of this. Like, I just think about how tiring it can get to live a good life, you know. And now I think of the verse, do not grow weary of doing good.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's hard because it's wearisome. And so, but no, I love that. I think you really hit the nail on the head with the take your thoughts captive. I don't think I've ever actually put that into perspective when it comes to self-control, is the idea of that's really the key. Like, that's the starting point, is when you take the thought captive,
it's a continual thing.
Right.
And I think that's where the practice comes in, because it's not like a one and done, like, okay, I said no this time, so now I'm good for the rest of my life.
That's a good point.
It's self-control because it's a continual thing that you have to do.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so hard. Because if it was a one and done, we'd all be pretty good at it, I feel like.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a continual thing. And, I mean, even if we go back to the fruits of the Spirit, patience is hard. That's something you have to have self-control, because we want to have our own emotions into it, but we have to slow down and be slow to speak. Yeah. And that takes self-control. Self-control is against what your flesh wants. Right. And I think that's what's so hard about it.
Absolutely. Did you have any other verses you wanted to share? Anything else that sticks out to you? I love it. Well, I know that really helped me, because putting your thoughts captive was a big one for me. And I remember, I don't know if you were there the year at camp where Sean did it. Yeah. I was like, it's funny because that's all I think about when I think of the verse is that year at camp. But I love that, and I think that's going to be huge for me. So with that, y'all, I hope you guys got something out of this conversation. I know for me and Linan, our self-control is crucial, and it's just a part of, for us it's the overeating, and for you it might be anything. There's so much you can dive into when it comes to self-control. I was like, whether it be anywhere super drastic to like pornography, drugs, alcohol, to something
gossiping,
right.
I mean, there's so many things.
You can get to what we call like minimal things like overeating or over shopping. That's definitely a problem, but I think we categorize it in the worse and the better. But in all honesty, lack of self-control is lack of self-control. And if you're, I love the 1,000-foot crutch. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Yeah. And so if you don't put your ground somewhere, you're willing to fall for anything. With that, I just hope this encouraged y'all. Our show is going to be abandoned by Benjamin William-Hastings and Brandon Lake. They sang it at church. It came up perfectly for this passage, and so it's just the perfect way to round off the little fruits of the Spirit. I have no idea what we're going to do next, so I'm excited for y'all to figure out. With that, we wish you guys the best. We want to be praying for you. It has been very heavy on my heart to be consciously praying for avid prayer requests and just things that I'm coming across throughout my day. And so please share with us your prayer requests. I think just about everybody who watches this channel has our phone numbers. Please send us your prayer requests. If you don't, awesome, you're here. Comment your prayer requests, and I can guarantee you we'll be praying over them. But we love you all, and I just look forward to the way that the gospel is going to be spread through us and through you guys. And I just encourage you to show self-control in your daily lives, because it is one of the best ways to show who our God is. So with that, we love you all, and deuces.